This is what the game looks like. You can see the chat boxes, toolbars, mini-map, the enemy health bar, your target's health bar up in the middle. You can't see what I'm doing, which is slightly unfortunate, but... I think if there's... No, I'll just leave it. And you can see all the abilities, aside from the two swords up there, and what's bound to 8, are lit up, as in they look like they can be activated. What's bound to 8 there is a reactive ability. It can only be used after you block an attack. So, I haven't blocked an attack yet. I'm not in combat. The two swords, which is bound to equals, is the limit break, and that can only be used in a party of 4 or more. So that's, I'm soloing here. Just not applicable. Anyway, so everything's up, everything is good. This is a gladiator, but this is more sort of a general overview. It works like you would expect. You click on your abilities, and you use them. Now, going on to the next one. This is me having used an ability. You can see that some of the stuff is on cooldown. This game employs a global cooldown when you put things through, certain actions through. There's a period of time that has to go through before you can use other abilities on that same cooldown. And that's what that is. You can see not everything is on the global cooldown. You can see most of that second bar, the top bar, is up. And that's because those are things like self-buffs, or... those are actually all self-buffs, yeah. The other thing that you'll notice is around what is bound to 2 and 4 on that first bar. They have this sort of dotted outline around them. And what that indicates is that it's a skill chain. Now, if you've played FF11, that phrase will be familiar. Forget that. What this means in regards to this game is that you use one skill, and then following skills in that chain will be lit up in that sort of dotted line border, and they'll have additional effects, or sometimes can only be used in a chain. It's not as important for Gladiator. I mean, this is how Gladiators generate most of their hate, is through their chain, but it really comes through on Pugilist. It's basically the class feature. The main sort of ability of the class has to do with chaining your attacks in a certain way and in a certain position. And so, going back to Gladiator for a second, you just basically gain hate on things. The Gladiator isn't terribly deep, but that's because as a tank, the developers wanted it to be easy to pick up. You don't want to have your tank be a high skill cap class, because that's typically bad for the community in general. You don't want it to be really hard to tank. They do have AoE skills. What's bound to 5 there is Flash, which is familiar to people. That is familiar if you've played FF11, and it works in virtually the same way. And that's about it. Like, for Gladiator, you have your hate tools, you have Flash, you have a ranged provoke, which is off the global cooldown. As you can see, it's bound to number 7 there. But it's fairly easy, it's fairly familiar, it's fairly, similar. Easy to pick up. There's not much to it. You flash, you use your defensive cooldowns, you do your hate building skill chain. That's pretty much how you play Paladin. Well, sorry, Gladiator. I played FF11 for a long time, so you'll have to excuse slips of the tongue of that. Now, I realized I didn't get any Pugilist screenshots until after the beta was over. So I may show it next week, I may not. I might wait until I can actually do video of this kind of stuff. That's a lot more helpful. But basically, on that antelope stag that you can see I'm hitting there, it's directly in front of me, there's a circle. A semicircle, most of a circle. That, where the circle is not there, indicates the rear of the monster. And then, when it is there, on the sides is the flanks, the sides of the monster, and then there's an arrow which you can't see on the very front, so you can tell where the monster is pointing. This helps on things like bombs and bogeys and water sprites and things where you're not exactly sure what the front of the monster is. This happened a bit in FF11, and it looks like they finally, rather than eliminating those sorts of designs, they made a UI element to compensate for it. But what this has to do with is Pugilist. And Pugilist is melee hand-to-hand DPS, so think Monk from Final Fantasy XI. It's pretty similar. But the big feature of this is these skill chains. There's 3 stances on a Pugilist, and they go through all 3 of them. You can only use certain moves in certain stances. It sounds weird, and it likely won't make sense until you see it or play it for yourself. But they are constantly moving from the back to the side, to the back to the side. 2 abilities in the back, 2 on the side, 1 ability in the back, 2 on the side, 2 abilities in the back, 1 on the side, this kind of thing. And they're constantly having to go between back and side. It doesn't matter which side, just not the front, not the back. They are the highest single target DPS, but the fight has to go perfectly for them to get up like that. I will have, when the game is actually letting me record and share video, I will have videos on all the classes, but who knows when that'll be, aside from after release, at the very latest. Going back to this global cooldown thing, you can see some abilities are able to be used at this moment, some aren't. Archer has a fair number of these abilities, I believe 2 or 3. 3 if you include the execute, that aren't on the global cooldown. And the key to Archer is applying your dots, your damage over times, and the way you manage these skills that aren't on the global cooldown. So, like Monk, wow, I did it again. Like Pugilist, it's a higher skill cap in the class to do good damage, and they are only behind Pugilist in terms of damage. This is all anecdotal, but the damage numbers are small enough that you can tell a lot easier. As you can see, it's only like 21, It's meaningless, sort of, without context, but... so, archers are all about using their ability, applying their dots, and using their abilities that are on the global cooldown intelligently. What this means is they can do an attack, use an ability that's not on the global cooldown, do an attack that is on the global cooldown after, and then you're increasing your DPS substantially over someone who can just use stuff that's on the global cooldown, which is most people, for the record. That's sort of the key to doing good Archer DPS. Again, no screenshots, didn't think about it. Pugilist and Archer were the two classes that I leveled first. And for some reason I didn't think to grab screenshots of it, which kind of sucks, but you wouldn't be getting a whole lot more out of them. Going on to Lancer, as I move us along here. What the hell? Lancer. Lancer also has positional abilities like Pugilist, but unlike Pugilist, they're not running behind, they're not constantly running around the monster. They're basically picking either, depending on their level and the monster and, what sort of fight it is, they're picking typically this side or the back. There are times where they will have to change between them, but they're not doing it with anywhere near the frequency that a Pugilist is. I have highlighted one of the better abilities on Lancer. And this is a good time to talk about how the the traits and action systems works. This menu currently is showing actions, as you can see. You can pick certain actions from other jobs, other classes, and put them onto your own. So for instance, as you can see, Blood for Blood increases damage dealt by 20% and increases damage suffered by 25%. This is requires Gladiator, Pugilist, Marauder, blah 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 blah. It's not just a Lancer ability. What this means is, unlike FF11, which had subjobs, you could only have up to level 37 of your, for the longest time, up to level 37 of your subjob. This allows you to gain benefits from other classes, picking and choosing, and it doesn't just have to be from one job. You can see it's a little hard to make out, but I've got two. Where it says additional, I've got 2 from Pugilist, 2 from Archer on my Lancer. So it's not just limited to one job, and you can pick and choose what that is. Now, those are all the sort of non-magic DPS, non-magic classes. There's a lot of variety in between them, and people who are calling it, there's a lot of calling the battle system shallow, and it's really not. It's how you understand your class and how you can bring that understanding that really determines how good you are as a player. And if someone calls it shallow, it's more likely that they're just not understanding what that class is supposed to do. Moving on, though. Clerics. Conjurers. This is their cleric stance ability, is what we're taking a look at, because it's their soloing mechanic. As you can see, swaps int and mind attribute ratings while increasing potency of attack spells by 10%, reducing potency of healing by 20%. And it's a toggle ability, essentially. And this is to help conjurers solo. So what it means is, swaps are int and mind, so conjurers or healers, they're likely to have lots of gear for mind. What this means is their attack spells aren't going to do a lot of damage. In cleric stance, it gives them their mind rating, basically their attack rating, instead of a healing rating. It gives them something where they can actually do damage. Not enough that they would ever eclipse any of the other DPS, but enough that they would be able to solo. And Conjure playing in a group is very similar to, a white mage or a red mage from FF11. There's nothing really new about that. They cure. They don't take AoE. That's pretty much it. Again, you want your healers and your tanks to be low skill cap. because then the groups in your game have a lot more success.